And so that's why I developed the Seek First method is once I was able to see what the root core issue was, then my purpose of bringing true health and wellness to people in a lasting way was the only thing I could focus on. Well, welcome to Seek First Podcast, Scott.
Well, this is really cool. Thank you for inviting me here. I'm really excited about this. I've never done a podcast.
Oh, really?
This is the very, very first one I've done.
You've already failed miserably.
Yeah,
You just dropped your mic, and it's a disaster already.
I know. I should have clipped it somewhere.
Clip it right there, yeah.
There we go.
No, it's just a friendly conversation I had. Welcome back, obviously, Coach Daniel here. It's our political season, apparently. As I mentioned to mayoral candidate John Hedges, I don't know what Seek First podcast is. It doesn't belong to me, and so whatever seems to be something that needs to be discussed or placed on my heart, John suggested that we meet, and when I looked you up, I was like, you know what, I'm pretty sure I met this guy before. Yeah. And, I had a political season in my life during COVID where we were forced through no fault of our own, but certainly not in the best, I would say, spiritual space, because we were pretty frustrated and resentful at the time for some of the policies that were put in place. But we got involved in the political process, and you were already involved kind of in that process when we came in. We brought our kids in. I ultimately became a district delegate. I was an alternate for a state delegate, and I got to see how the sausage was made. And I haven't been back.
Right? Right? Sometimes when people see how the sausage is made, they're like, seriously? Do I have time for that? But I encourage civic engagement.
Yep.
I absolutely do. When you and I met, it was at the local caucus. Mm-hmm. It was at that base level where you get to actually meet the people who are in your neighborhoods that you don't always see them, and you might not even recognize them because it's a few blocks over kind of thing.
Yep.
But it's an opportunity then to meet some people. Not everybody's exactly like-minded, but generally they have, they're either upset about something or they're like, hey,
passionate about changing
I need to make sure these things are addressed. And so, they're passionate.
Yeah.
And we have different things happening now that is changing. We didn't do a straw poll, as an example, this last go-around of, hey, who do we want to vote for the president?
Yes.
And we didn't do it. And I was like, some did informal ones, but there wasn't that like there has been in the past.
Okay.
So things do change.
Yeah.
We hope they're for the better.
Yeah. Well, I wouldn't classify my experience as a negative one by any stretch of the imagination. It was more demanding than I anticipated.
Sure.
And I wouldn't say that means that I thought it wasn't going to be demanding. I just had no frame of reference. But, during that gubernatorial election process, there were a lot of meetings, you got to meet a lot of cool people for sure. Right. And some people that are potentially going to be the governor of the state of Minnesota, and you get to ask them legitimate questions. And, the neat thing is my vote, as a potential, at least state delegate, had punch behind it. Instead of casting my vote as 1 in a million, it was like 1 in 1,000 or whatever, roughly somewhere in there. And so it had a lot more punch to it. It had a lot more like, oh, okay. So part of it was just simply I can't be all things and do all things. I serve in my own ways. I'm glad I did it. I'm glad I got to experience that process. To
each there is a season, right?
Yeah, for sure.
And similar to you, I had many years ago got involved for a little bit, and then like, oh, nope, I'm just so the audience understands, and I'll get more into this, but I was in the military, and so had to be apolitical. Couldn't take a side because when the commander-in-chief, doesn't matter if it's Republican or Democrat, the commander-in-chief is still the commander-in-chief.
Yep.
And
He's
so
your superior.
they're the superior, and we take orders from the commander-in-chief. So
there's something extraordinarily refreshing about that by today's standards.
Yeah.
Like
yes. Well, because of that,
a respect for the office that, regardless of your personal opinion, at least still has some element of respect and appreciation. And, one of the things that I never understood is ever wanting a president to do poorly, or, regardless of whether he's on your team or not.
That's right. Well,
or she.
Yep, that's correct. He or she.
Yep.
You should be rooting for their success. Yes. If they make mistakes, you can capitalize on that in the next election.
Sure.
I get that. But you should be rooting for their success because their success
is yours.
Dictates your success.
Correct.
And from a military standpoint, it can be life and death,
Amen.
Right? And so it matters. And so I'm always happy to, hey, I hope they make the right decision. Let's support them on those things. And sometimes we can agree with some of the stuff.
Yeah,
even though they're the opposition.
What?
They're like, oh my gosh.
Doesn't that make you a sellout?
Well, some people might see it that way. That's not how I see it.
There was a Joe Rogan's last special. He talks about, he basically makes a joke about like, hey, we believe that healthcare is universal and it's a basic right and everyone should have it. And he's like, I agree with that. And he's like, and I believe that, blah, 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 blah. And he's like, and I agree with that. And we believe that you should give hormone blockers to 10-year-olds and blah, blah. And he's like, whoa, wait. Is this a package deal? Like, how did you slip that one in when I'm so liberal in my, traditionally liberal in my thinking on these broader issues, and then if I don't, take the whole pill, I'm not a part of the team anymore. Right.
And it is unfortunate that is a lot of the way America has
least
become
online
very
culture,
divided.
right?
Very much so.
Yeah.
And I think it's easy on the online culture because you don't look people in the eyes.
Yeah.
And I'm going to give you an example. Last night, I attended a forum, the League of Women Voters Forum, and there are 4 of us that are running for 2 seats on the City Council of Andover. And 3 of us showed up. The other person was working out of town and couldn't make it, but had statements that were able to be read. Anyway, it's the first time I got to meet these guys.
Yeah.
They're good guys. I'm not here to bash these guys.
Yeah, right.
I'm not. I got to give them a lot of credit because they're doing what I'm doing, which is we're running.
Right.
We're stepping forward and we're trying and we want to make a difference in our community. Mm-hmm. We all think that we have that edge that can make that difference, right?
Yeah.
So I'll tip my hat off to them for that part. But that's at the local nonpartisan piece.
Correct.
So
that's
we
on the
can
human
do
level.
That. It's much more human.
Yeah.
Now, they may vote differently than I do.
Yeah.
But at our level here, we can work together because 2 of us will have to work together.
For sure.
And, I didn't see any of these guys as being bad, evil, bad. No, they're human. They have families. They're part of this community. They want to be here.
Yeah.
And they want to make that difference. So I'll salute those guys.
And, this is such an important distinction. So I'm just going to go there.
Sure.
I work in a franchise. Yeah. And we have good owners and we have bad owners. And to some degree that's subjective, depending on your standards and your level of operation. But we get some complaints. We run a really, really nice, clean, high-end gym, so we tend to set the bar pretty high. And so our feedback from other gyms oftentimes is, it was dirty, it wasn't well kept, and we don't like that for multiple reasons. But one thing that I always try to delineate is just because this person may not have the same standards, may not have the same passion and dedication towards, running a community that we do, doesn't give me the right to know this person on a personal level. And so even though I can maybe say, hey, you know what, this gym isn't up to my standards, and I don't think it's a great representation of the brand or something subjectively truthful from a broader picture, I always reserve my judgment of the person for a personal relationship with that person.
Yes.
And so even on a national level, I can say, Kamala Harris seems like a cackling hyena, but I don't know her personally.
Right.
And so I'm always very careful to go, well, I'm not going to claim she is these things because I don't know her. And I'm not saying that you can't take some presumption. Same with Trump, same exact thing, right? Okay, Trump's a pompous windbag, right? It's like, well, yes, he definitely has those moments where he comes across pompous and he comes across windbaggy, right? No question about it. Me too. For starters, right?
Yeah, I'll raise my hand too.
But I don't know him.
Right.
It's all presumption. And
it's also what you're saying. It gets into some Christian roots, right? We don't know what's in their hearts.
Correct.
Right? But we can make observations.
Yes.
We see stuff. So when you hear somebody like Kamala Harris laughing, and it does sound to you like it is cackling, okay, well, that's an observation.
It's an observation.
That's okay. When Trump says, hey, it's the best ever, kind of thing.
Right.
All right.
Well, we know it's an ego lie.
Yes.
It's an embellishment.
Absolutely.
Yes. And that doesn't exactly. And so the same thing applies across. And I think you point out an extraordinarily important thing that, I'm not here to grandstand. This is about you and who you are and what you're running and why you're in the ring. But I think, to your point, an important message for whether you're in Andover or whether you're on a state level government or whether you're on a federal level government is remember to do your best to separate, the caricature, the behaviors, that observation versus ultimate judgment are two very, very different things. And I think that separation is important because it adds an element of humility, openness, and ability to not vote from a place of, self-righteous contempt or judgment.
I think that's very important.
Yeah.
And again, last night's forum was a great opportunity, not just for me. One of the other candidates had his wife there. I had my wife there. They didn't get to be in the room, so they got to observe us outside. They got to talking. And, they're friendly.
Right.
And I think they might talk later after the election,
Sure.
whatever happens,
Yes.
kind of thing. And they're friendly. That's Andover.
Yeah.
And that should be Andover. We shouldn't be going after each other. We can have a difference of opinion.
Yeah.
And I'm okay with that. I got to tell you, some of my signs are in yards that have other political signs. Some of the people I agree with that are on those political signs, some I do not.
Yeah.
It's not about the other members in the yard. It's about that person that said, hey, I'd like to have one of your signs because I want to support you in a nonpartisan situation.
Yeah.
And I got to tell you, I generally lean conservative.
Yeah.
I do. My mom.
I was going to say, tell me about your roots and
well,
why you're framed that way.
That's a good way to get right into that, actually. I'm framed that way because I grew up in northwestern Minnesota in a town called Red Lake Falls.
Okay.
It's nobody ever seems to know for some reason. Every now and then I run into somebody.
Heard of it.
And it's actually a really nice community. But, it's small. It's rural.
How big?
Well, when I was growing up there, it was a little over 1,000. It was about
Okay, you're a little smaller than
1,600. But it's a nice community. I'll just say that. But it's an impoverished community when I was growing up. I had no idea about that.
Sure.
everybody was the same in that community, right?
Right.
I thought I was solidly middle class because I knew people who were poorer than me,
For sure.
and I knew people who had more money than me.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until I went to college and did financial aid, I'm filling it out, and I called and I'm talking to my mom, hey, Mom, I need you're from your taxes, I need this. And she gives me the numbers. Mom, you must have made a mistake. She goes, well, what are you talking about? And I'm like, well, according to this, we're below the poverty line. And she goes, where have you been, kid? What, in my mind,
Yeah.
I was solidly middle class because that's who the town was. I mean,
Sure.
it was a great place anyway to grow up because I learned a good work ethic. I worked, my brother-in-law had a farm, my friends had farms, so I would go out and work on the farm. And I'll tell you what, when you work on a farm, you work hard, especially dairy farmers, but baling hay, picking rocks. I mean, this isn't like going to the beach and grabbing a rock and skipping it. These are big rocks, and you're bending all the time. I mean, it's
in the gym world, or certainly in MMA, certain physical sports, up until maybe 10 years ago, that type of freakish strength was always considered farm strong. That's what we would call it, right?
Oh, yeah.
We would call them their farm strong.
Yep.
They didn't have necessarily the most defined muscles like people who would strength train or bodybuild. But you get them in a wrestling match and the farmers won. Right? And now we call it functional strength training, which is phenomenal. It's just fascinating. And so now the exercise science world has figured out how to take that level of natural strength building, like how do you pick up a 110-pound bale of hay or a 70-pound bale of hay that is your size, that your arms barely wrap around, and now you're going to train your body how to support that from core, from glutes, and so you have to naturally do that if you're on the farm.
Yep.
But now it's almost comical to me that this natural way of becoming Herculean, like unrecognizably and weirdly strong, has now become like a science. It's now become an art form in the gym in a creative way to use the tools we have to teach you how to use your body the same way farmers were figuring out how to use their body naturally just by wrestling steers here, picking up rocks, hay bales, you name it, but having to use the entire...
Absolutely.
Yeah. So,
and when you get the physical aspect straight, right? There's a piece to the physical that I know you can talk about that isn't just the physical.
Right.
It's about the sound mind,
It is.
the body, the spirit, right? And when you can get all those working together, now you're in great shape, right?
Yes, you are. That would be the definition of health.
It is.
It is.
And we are
the
facing
proper
a
definition of
mental health crisis
Yes.
all throughout every community. And I know
If
people would like to say, oh, Andover doesn't have that.
Oh, no.
Oh, yes, we do. Everybody
Absolutely.
does.
In fact, this would be my counter argument to the talking point of privilege. Because I understand what people say when they say white privilege or suburban privilege, let's say. Because I think it's a little more of a class thing than it is a race thing if you want to get technical.
Yep.
However, privilege is a funny thing. And I would imagine that the upper middle class, well-to-do kids that are brought up with everything and are sheltered from the realities of life, that are given a silver platter and then, eventually come in contact with the realities of life, have actually a shortage of privilege in that capacity. And maybe parents that work, 60 hours a week instead of dedicating themselves to preparing their children for the inevitability of life, creates deficiencies in the mental and emotional and spiritual stability of these upper middle class kids, which is why the kids that are typically dying of fentanyl and meth and heroin are not inner city kids, but they're actually well-to-do suburban middle class kids, because there's an absence there. And so, whereas, if you can survive inner city upbringing, and maybe, you're facing battles that on paper seem extremely unfair, which I think is a fair analysis to some degree, but you can persevere that. There's a privilege that comes along with your ability to build the strength necessary to persevere something like that. So I think we're just very short-sighted on the idea of privilege in general. I think each individual person is very unique in their upbringing, in their challenges, in their struggles. Some of those seem to be more harshly applied early on. Some of them seem to be more harshly applied because of precipitous drop, because of too many perceived privileges early on. And so I just think overall we're very, very short-sighted and narrow in our understanding of what do we mean by privilege. I know what you mean by the talking point, but what you're doing is you're selecting an arbitrary element of privilege, and you're not looking at the downfalls that actually come with that. And so what we say with our kids, and we're actually a big poker family. I love playing poker. We don't really play for a lot of money, but we sit down and we play all the time. And one of the reasons we do that is to show you that your two pocket aces can lose. Right?
Yes,
and to show you that my 7-2 offsuit just beat you, right? I just got the worst hand dealt. But because of the way I played it.
It's what you're dealt.
Yep.
What you do with
it.
it.
Because
right?
I played it a certain way, I did something with it that you didn't expect me to do.
Yeah.
Right? And vice versa. You just got dropped on your head because your perceived privilege of these high pocket pairs, well, it just made you go all in a dumb situation and you overvalued it. And now you're out.
Yes.
Because you didn't play it properly.
Yeah.
And so I think, I don't mean to derail on this, but it's a sensitive topic for me. And I would say my online presence, my soul, my spirit is a unifying spirit.
Fantastic.
It's a spirit of togetherness. And these conversations are the things that drive me crazy on an individual level, but I also feel the call because I have a certain way of articulating things that seems to resonate with people in a way where it's like, how does that not make sense to every single person that hears it?
Right.
And that's not to say that there aren't policies. That isn't to say that there aren't things that we can all agree on. Like I would say to conservatives, drop the pull yourself up by your bootstraps crap, because they might not have boots to pull themselves up by. And that's our civic responsibility as a culture to assess that situation. On the flip side, personal accountability is important.
Absolutely.
And we can't breed a culture of dependable people, even if it's unintended. The intention has to be to get people moving on their own to the best of our ability, while also understanding some people just aren't able to move on their own, and we have to take accountability for it. I call it an integrated model of thinking. We have for way too long thought linearly along these black and white abstract ways of thinking.
Yes.
And all it does is what you said. All it does is just butt heads, pull people apart, when really at the core, 80 to 90% of people in this culture can come to a pretty darn good agreement on most things with a little bit of compromise and nuance from a loving place. And it's just not a conversation that either hasn't been able to have because of the way we've communicated and the media available, or, has always happened locally or just was avoided and whatever. But I think we've come to a point in time in our culture where people need to step up in that integrated model where we can acknowledge that it's not one thing, it's not two things, it's probably about 15 things.
Right.
And if we can point all of those things out and agree that we need to do the absolute best while minimizing the worst in every single one of these aspects, there's no it's amazing what we could accomplish.
Absolutely.
Sorry.
No,
that was my soapbox.
That's fine. That's a good soapbox because it's a lesson for all of us, right? And I'm, as you were talking, I'm going, yes, yes, yes. And I'm thinking in my own mind about personal experiences that I've had, family things that I have had that fall into these pieces that you were talking about.
Yeah.
I want to come right back to that, but what I want to do is just wrap up of why I have some of my core beliefs with where I grew up and why.
Yeah.
But it was a great background to be in a small community where people cared about everybody else. They helped everybody else. We'd kid around like everybody. We'd make fun of each other.
A lot of accountability in a small town.
Oh my gosh! And you know what? My mom knew everything I did because somebody else would tell. And if I didn't tell her first, I had a little bit of trouble.
Yeah.
But what was neat about the politics side of my growing up simply was my mom taught me to be an independent.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
From a political
standpoint.
Neutral.
Independent. Now, her idea of what an independent meant to her was you were a Democrat. Okay. I mean, that's just at that time in life, the DFL, farmer laborers, I mean, they were pretty smart at what they did back then and how they got this group.
That was Plainview too, where I grew up.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah.
And that was how I grew up.
Yeah. But my mom said, do critical thinking. Think about and listen to those candidates that are out there. Do you support what they're actually saying? And then go a step further. If they're already somebody who is in office, what does their record say? Mm-hmm. And, sometimes the record is not what they really believe and think and do. So you do have to dig in a little bit.
Yeah.
But, again, for the longest time, I prided myself in being an independent, right? And national elections, my first vote was for Ronald Reagan. Okay. But I got to say, my second vote wasn't for the Republican.
Yeah.
It was for Clinton, and he won.
Yeah.
Okay. But after that, I didn't vote for Clinton the second time, right? Okay. So we grow and we learn and we make mistakes.
Yeah.
I thought Clinton was awesome initially.
Yep.
And then over time, I'm like, I don't agree with this. I don't agree with that.
Yep.
So I shift.
Maybe some things sounded a little bit better, but you were able to work yourself through maybe some unintended consequences or some, what is it? The Rodell is paved with good intention.
And there's a lot of that, right?
Yep.
And so I get it. I don't go out there a lot and say, that guy is the biggest beep, 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 right? I don't think that that's helpful.
Right.
At the same time, I'm frustrated with certain people.
Yeah, sure.
And I want to say some of that stuff.
Yeah.
But I do try to control that aspect of things.
Okay.
But that's how I grew up.
Sure.
So when I left home, went to college, then joined the military.
Yep.
And then the military was solidly, you're apolitical, right? Worked great. I'd move to whatever state, and I would register as an independent. I was proud of that.
Yeah.
And
which branch?
I was in both the Army. I was an enlisted Army paratrooper initially for 4.5 years.
Okay.
Then I crossed over after the first Gulf War. I was I was away for 8 months, in a vacation spot of the world. Anyway, I ended up becoming an officer in the Air Force after that. Stayed on active duty for another 8 years, and then joined the Minnesota Air National Guard. And then from the Minnesota Air National Guard, I ended up getting a position with the Joint Force Headquarters, which was Army and Air. And then I ended up deploying with the Army as an Air Force officer to Basra, Iraq.
All right.
In a spirit of jointness, right?
Speaking of integration.
But you work with the people that are there.
Yeah.
And I got to tell you, the military is a great microcosm of the rest of society.
I bet.
You have,
everything.
You have all genders, all colors, all religions. I mean, you have everything.
Yeah.
But they work together.
Yeah.
And you know
what?
what?
Concept.
It's amazing when you all bleed red.
Right.
It's the same for everybody.
Amen.
And so I just kind of take those experiences and say, listen, you and I may not agree politically, but can we agree on 80% of the issues? If you're 80% of the issues, we're allies. That last 20%, we'll get through it somehow, or maybe we'll just put it off
on the shelf.
Yes.
Yep.
I had a boss. I worked for the Veterans Corps. This most recently for a couple of years, which is the Conservation Corps of Minnesota and Iowa.
Okay.
And when I was asked about, hey, why don't you go, consider taking this job here? I was like, I'm not interested in the Conservation Corps. I mean, that's just not my thing. But I did. I went and talked to these guys, and the executive director and one of the senior managers that interviewed me, they were talking to me about this wonderful, cool program. We all like conservation. Everybody should want clean air, clean water. I mean, all these things. And so that part's great. But I was like, yeah, but I'm not a tree hugger. I mean, we need to use God's resources here, be good stewards, but after talking to them, I'm like, oh, I didn't really understand fully what you guys are doing and how you're doing it. But what caught me as a conservative was this was a pilot program for the Veterans Corps. And the executive director goes, you were so honest, because it was an informational. I wasn't trying to get the job. I was just asking questions and saying, I don't know if I agree with it. And I was pushing back on things. Yeah. And he goes, you were so honest, and you've got such an entrepreneurial background. You've done so many things. We believe you if you told us we need to kill this program. And I said, well, what would you do if I tell you to kill the program? And he said, we'll kill it. And I said, wait a minute. You're kind of a quasi-government agency kind of thing. No programs ever die. You always leave.
I was going to say.
And but he was serious. And so after that, I was like, okay, now I'm interested in the job. And I took the job. Yeah. And it's a great organization, first off. I mean, I'm not here to pitch the Conservation Corps of Minnesota and Iowa, but they are a great organization. What I found out from my boss, we're opposite on politics. However, we could talk. He was a great boss. A guy named Brian Miller. If you ever watch this podcast, you're a great boss. You're not my boss anymore, so now I'm comfortable saying that.
Yeah, right?
Yep.
Shout out.
But he was great, and we had great conversations. There's a part, that 20%, nope, he's not convincing me, I'm not convincing him, and that's okay, we're still friends.
Yeah.
And that's what I think we should be like.
100%.
I mean, I don't want you to be me, otherwise my wife would wonder why she married me.
Right.
Why not you? Okay, but you can help me be a better person by opening my mind up to a different point of view. Not saying that point of view is correct, but I can think differently about it.
So a little humility goes a long way.
Yes.
And our whole life is based on one fundamental truth, which is at the end of the day, we don't know anything. And we can feel very strongly about it. Our understanding of truth can reflect very consistently within reality, to the point where we want to base our fundamental understanding and morals and values upon that. But the beautiful part about being human is that our ideas don't have to be us. And our ability to separate from our understanding or what we want to believe or what makes us feel good about ourselves because we believe it, these are the things that we make the mistake of attributing to our identity. And instead of being able to go, well, maybe if I'm basing my life on these foundations that I believe to be righteous and true, and I have someone sitting across from me that's challenging these core ideas, and I'm not willing to hold them up to some scrutiny, what does that say about my confidence in these ideas? And what does that say about what I might be basing my life on and my family's life on if you're not even willing to hold them up to the light to be scrutinized by someone who might have a different opinion or perspective? And that's how we are able collectively to drill down to what should be some form of general unified principle that we can all, in all of our differences, in all of our diversity, in all of our unique individual perspectives, still unify around, because without that, you guys, you want to read a history book.
Yep.
It doesn't end well.
It doesn't.
You know? And so I think, for me, it took me a long time to understand that, Scott. I was a very proud, stupid, wannabe intellectual, I would say. Mm-hmm. And so when I would have a revelation or an insight or come upon an idea that seemed to be unique or truthful to some degree, I would attach it to my identity and parade it around as if it's me. And, well, it never worked out well in the end.
Right.
And so until I was able to, get to a point in my own life where I could humbly say, well, here's my best guess based on what I see, what I think I understand, but I'm always curious in good faith of letting the ideas and perspectives battle so that you and I don't have to.
There you go. But you have to approach those things with a spirit of humbleness.
Yes.
Because
and good
otherwise, because otherwise, if we were in opposite positions right now and you're presenting, all I'm trying to do then is like, okay, how am I going to push back? And I'm not actively listening then. I am totally coming up, well, I got to say this in response to him.
Yep. And then all you're doing is expressing your knowledge. There's no attempt to actually build upon it and understand.
That's right.
And that's where our culture needs a major makeover across political boundaries, which is, hey, sunshine, we need to agree that neither one of us have this figured out. Here's my core beliefs. Here's your core beliefs. Let's hold it up and let's figure it out. And that transformation process should result in both of us becoming better together in that process. And we leave here, hopefully, in the spirit of this conversation, we both leave here a little better than we came in.
Absolutely right.
And that's what the logos, that's what the spirit of truth in words and conversation is supposed to be about.
Yes.
So, and if we can somehow miraculously integrate that at least into our local political conversation, which seems very doable to me, especially in a community like Andover.
Yes.
I mean, you're always going to have a few wackos out there on either side.
Of course.
Let's accept that.
Yes.
Let's put the narcissists and the psychopaths and the small percent of the subset of the population that's just looking to stir crap up aside.
Yeah. That's right. There is that.
Yep. And let's have an adult conversation.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I mean, I have a political view. Yep. I absolutely do.
Yep, you've made that pretty clear.
But I'm willing to listen to people.
Yeah.
And I need to. If I am elected, guess what?
Yeah.
I'm not just representing one side.
That's right.
It's all the citizens of Andover. And you know what? Active listening is an important skill set. I think I have that.
Yeah.
But I will also tell you that it's important to present opportunities to people to let them express themselves.
Yeah.
So how is our system set up right now at the city council? All right, you've got 2 city council meetings a month, plus you've got a workshop that happens. And when people come in to the city council meeting, the citizens come in to say something, well, here's the problem. It's a tight agenda. They only have limited time.
Yeah, it feels like a Fox News or CNN segment where it's like, if you're lucky, you get a couple of talking points, you start screaming over the top of each other, and it's over. There's no ability to articulate and have this kind of conversation.
Exactly. And when that happens, often you get to see people who are, their blood's boiling. They're already mad about something.
Right.
Sometimes not. I mean, some people are coming in and say, hey, I just have a question. What are we doing about this? Oh, we didn't even know that was even an issue. And okay, that's all fine and dandy. But when I think about this, I'm like, okay, well, what can we do differently here? At the forum last night, I talked about, why aren't we doing something like town halls? Not every week, not even necessarily monthly.
Quarterly
but
or something.
one where it's not, hey, here's the agenda, here's the issues. Let's just have a forum where we can come in and have some Celsius. I mean, I think that's a great drink, by the way.
And, sell it.
You know, I'm waiting for you to be that picture. You're the spokesperson.
Somebody out there knows somebody.
Yes.
Hook me up.
There we go. It is a good drink. I like it. But when it's that kind of forum, though, where people can just talk a little bit, I want a forum. I was asked a question, so were the other candidates. Well, what ideas do you have to improve? Okay.
Yep.
So thinking, okay. Well, I have this idea and this idea. Well, you think I've got a corner on the market for ideas? Are you? The citizens out there are going to be far better at that than I am. But we need to have a forum where they feel comfortable saying, hey, what about this?
Yeah.
Granted, some people will come up with something that makes, what? That's the most ridiculous thing ever. But by them articulating that, it could trigger somebody else to say, well, what if we twisted that a little bit and did this? Would that make sense?
Yep.
All right.
Perfect.
You know, I love that approach.
Agreed.
And so I advocated for that last night of well, what are we doing already?
I love that idea.
So, we have facilities we can do it in. It's not going to cost anything.
I'll moderate it.
I would love that. I am a fiscal hawk. I really am. And I really, truly, and I know this is kind of trite, but I really believe in let's focus on our needs.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Don't say, wants are worthless. They're not worthless. But in an economic situation where we know the county has proposed some pretty high increases in taxes, the state just spent all the surplus and then obligated us 40% beyond that.
Yeah.
Taxes are going up. I mean, I've got news for everybody. If you don't understand it, it's going up.
And I saw this cursorily, maybe you can validate this. I know as a small business owner, we are getting whooped.
Oh, yeah.
Is Minnesota now number one?
It
depends on, I'm sure, how you measure that.
It's how you make that sausage,
right?
Yes, it is.
But we're certainly in the conversation.
Yeah, without a doubt.
And again, that's not to say, like, in all fairness, we don't have a homeless problem like San Francisco or, some of the other comparable, states like California, New York, and some of these other. I think we can all agree that Minnesota, for being in the conversation the most taxed, is still an amazing place to live, is an incredible state. There's huge benefits to that, and I don't know how anyone could argue that point. However,
there are some major issues that need to be addressed, and
we can't keep taxing, unless we do want to agree somehow that it is just going to be a socialist, state of Minnesota, in which case you and I are probably moving.
We are at that point.
But so be it. I mean, that's a beautiful part of the United States.
I get the idea. I mean, I can't get into the mind of somebody who's truly a socialist. Because in my military duties, I mean, I've opposed, the Marxist ideology, communism. I mean, socialism can lead to very bad consequences, and we know that. History tells us that.
The worst consequences.
Millions of deaths have occurred because somebody had good intentions in socialism, right? But it just went too far.
Yes.
And I know you can argue the opposite when it comes to capitalism. You can say, unfettered capitalism, which I don't agree with unfettered capitalism.
Yeah, right.
I am a capitalist, but I'm like, no, you can't, because unfettered capitalism would mean no rules, no problem. I can dump hazardous waste in Andover, and I know this has happened in the past.
Yeah.
I get this.
And there is something extraordinarily ugly about the pursuit of endless wealth from a monetary standpoint. It's extraordinarily gross. So more to the specifics regarding why you threw your hat in the ring. Like, what are the things that are truly motivating you? Where did you get your call, and what are you hoping to bring?
I'll tell you initially, So I spent 24 years in the military, basically, and I mentioned it earlier that you're apolitical, you don't get involved. So I have been asked over the years, hey, you should run for office. I'm like, no, no, that's not my thing. And but no longer in the military, retired, been a businessman, doing all these things, and I was seeing a need, and several people asked me to consider running.
It's humbling.
Well, the first thing I had to do, though, was, reflect on it, pray about it. And by the way, the real first thing, I talked to my wife and said, hey, what do you think? Fully expecting her to say no. I really did, because all the other times she would always say no. And I'm like, okay. Expected it. When she said, why not? I'm like, why not? All right, now I have to pray on it. And so did. I reflected and prayed on it and said, now's the time for me to step up and serve my community. Home is Andover. So let's do it. I've got a lot of both public and private sector experience. And so from that standpoint, I mean, publicly, it's the military stuff, the government piece. But on the private sector, corporate level executive, Target Corporation, I know a lot of Minnesota people are part of that.
For sure.
Did that for a while, and then had my own business, run some small businesses, and my last experience was with the Conservation Corps. I was a manager for the Veterans Corps, which is a pilot program that we were doing. And so I think that for the city council of Andover, we need people that have a perspective that is different. You need to have somebody who has a business mind that has written checks for their employees, right? And didn't pay themselves because there wasn't quite enough. That's a hard thing, as you know, as a business owner. You've been faced that many times in the past, and it's hard. But you keep hanging in there and you keep pressing ahead till you go through the failures to success. And that's kind of the attitude I think that we need to be bringing to City Hall. City Hall is filled with great people.
Sure
some
seems
people
like
always
it.
Think, it's government workers.
Do you think that's because they feel the political divide on the national level through this soap operic, video game we seem to all be engaged in on a national level, and just because it's been so divisive, we think it applies? I mean, and follow-up question, do you see that play out when you are door knocking?
There's a couple things with that, right? I think our national discussion right now, it's
not much of a discussion.
Yes, it's a name calling.
Yeah, it's a name calling, right?
But so I don't remember if I already said this, but I will tell you, I've got a friend who does my taxes. Okay, she will describe herself as a Bernie Sanders socialist, a Democrat socialist. That's how she sees herself. I don't see myself that way at all, just to be clear. I'm not polar opposite, but I am to the right side of that.
Less socialism, more democracy.
All about capitalism. And,
right.
Not unfettered capitalism, but capitalism. But we have great conversations. She's not arguing all the time from, it's emotionally bad. No, she tries to come up with, and often has some good thoughts. And I'm like, I didn't hear that. I need to look at that. And so I actually think there needs to be more of what we used to have a lot more of, people that can have conversations. It's not that they're going to convince me, to abandon who I am over here. But if I can understand more of what they're saying and treat them with respect.
For sure.
And they're doing the same, we can have this discussion.
We need to.
I think we do. And the military, I probably said this already. The bottom line is, it's a microcosm of society when you're in the military. All walks of life, all kinds of things.
But unified.
When you're there, you're unified. We didn't care if somebody was a different color.
Yep.
We didn't care what their religion was.
Right.
We didn't care about their gender.
I don't think most people do in general. I think that's a forced pile of food that they're trying to cram down our throat.
We cared they bled red, by the way.
Yeah.
That's what we cared about. And so from that standpoint, I do think you're right. I think that some of this is being forced and trying to divide us. And I'm like, no, just because that person across from you has a disagreement on a particular view on something doesn't mean they're a bad American.
Yeah. I also think going back to the basics of what it means to be human, I think a lot of, conservative types take for granted that freedom isn't free and not everyone is fully prepared for the responsibilities that come with independence and freedom. And not every single person wants to go out as an entrepreneur or a small business owner. This was very evident during COVID. I think it separated the people who were happy to be told what to do and the people who had developed a lifestyle of independence and freedom and had earned that right and felt the initial, kind of, hey, what the hell, man? Like, you're going to jump into my life now? I've taken full accountability for my life and now you're going to jump in and tell me, so there was some, and I think it's important, for my collectivist side of people to understand that, yes, in fact, you do want people like that. You may not want to enter into that full conversation in your life regarding everything you need to be accountable for. But there are lots of people in this world, the leaders, the people who push it forward, that do own that responsibility. And so I posted this on social media. I said politics from the beginning of time, whether it's a masculine and feminine energy or a collective versus individual or a protection versus inclusion or whatever it is, there's always two energies that are going to battle there. And we're here because we've properly negotiated between the two of them successfully for thousands of years, not because we've kicked out one part of the conversation and said, this is the only way we're going to be, or vice versa. And so having a productive conversation between the personal accountability and the collective accountability, that's where democratic socialism comes into play. It's like, I understand someone who can look at that macrocosmically and say, hey, we have a responsibility. Let's just make this one big thing that, and it's like, in theory, that's great, but there's downsides of it. And I also understand the side of the thing that says, no, this is going to have adverse effects on people's willingness to try, to achieve, to get all the amazing things that come out of the United States, and we can't just deaden people's ambition and passion and things like that. And I can understand the collectivists coming back in and saying, yeah, but not everybody's equal in that. And so, it has to be but the level of appreciation is ridiculous right now. Like, I look at, I'm a little more on the conservative side of the argument right now, but that's me not because I'm naturally a conservative. My personality type is not conservative.
Sure.
It's not. Yeah. It's just not.
Yeah.
But I feel like we need that. I feel like I have to adapt based on, where this, I think mythologically, it's called, we're riding on the back of a giant serpent. Yes. And we don't know when this thing is going to curve too far to the right or the left. And it's our job individually not to pick a homecoming king or queen like Trump or Kamala, but understand the energy and the flow and the spirit of that conversation that needs to be moderated to make sure that...
I get where you're coming from on that, right?
Yeah.
And why is it that you want that? It's for the greater good.
It is.
That's part of what we need to really reinvigorate here. It's for the greater good. Yes, I'm about, the individual being able to do things, take responsibility, accountability too.
Yep.
But I'm also looking at the greater good.
Yeah.
And I look at that my mom, bless her soul, she raised me to be an independent.
Yep.
The truth of that matter was, she was a Democrat back in that day.
Yep.
And she voted Democrat. I know that.
Yep.
But she taught me to be a critical thinker, and so for the longest time in the military, I was registered when I'd go to another state and serve our country in North Carolina or wherever. I would register as an independent.
Yeah.
And frankly, I have voted for a Democrat president.
Yep.
I have voted for Republican presidents.
Yep.
Okay. Well, I lean now pretty solidly to the right.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the right doesn't always do things correctly.
No.
So we need people
especially
to be calling it out.
Right.
I'd like it to be coming from the right, calling ourselves out, and sometimes that happens.
Yep.
But I got to tell you, the left is really good at calling out the right,
Yep.
and the right's good at calling out the left.
Yep.
And we need to learn and do things that unify the country and work for the greater good of all, because when we're working together, there is nothing that we can't accomplish.
And if you've never asked yourself, honestly, if you might be part of the problem, then you are by definition part of the problem.
Fair. That's fair.
I think that is 100% truthful.
Yeah.
And because at that point, if you've never asked yourself that question, then that means that you are an absolute ideologue at that point. And that doesn't mean you're making a decision. It means the decision is making you. And I think that is why, me personally, whether it's my faith, whether it's my ability as a husband, whether it's my ability as a father, I am constantly going, well, am I right?
Yeah.
Am I wrong? Well, maybe I am maybe I am being
your kids are the ones
it's
who
like,
call you out.
Right. And same on the political side of things. If you've never questioned that,
yes,
then you're not actually a Democrat or a Republican. You are just a tribalized person who has made this a part of your identity so deeply that you can't even see an entire part of the picture that needs to be seen if we're ever going to heal, if we're ever going to unify, if we're ever going to progress forward in a way that I think deep down we all want to.
Well, I think at the city level,
yes,
right?
Sorry, yeah,
at
we're going all big.
Bit,
yeah, that we can do.
We are nonpartisan, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's the positions.
Based on all the people I've met, I would agree upon that.
But here's what I will say.
Yep.
Talk to some of the city people, city hall people that said, okay, listen, most of the time when votes are taken at the city council, it's unanimous.
Yeah.
All right. There's, call it 5% of the time, that isn't the case.
Yeah.
That's where it's going to really matter.
Yeah.
What your real foundational values really are.
Truth.
And I got to tell you, I'm a fiscal conservative. Maybe even a fiscal hawk, you might call me. Because I get where our kitchen budget, we can't afford to be buying steak every night.
Mm-hmm.
I love steak, by the way, but I don't get to eat it very often anymore because prices have gone up. And I'm like, I want a steak.
Yeah, right.
But you got to be a realist, and something we need to be looking at within our city right now, whether you're on the left side or the right side, is making sure the dollars are matched, because sometimes they don't.
Yeah.
And I gotta just tell you a side story. So I was at a coffee shop wearing this same shirt, and I was talking to somebody. We just finished our conversation, and so he was leaving, I was getting up to leave, and this woman came up to me and said, hey, I see that you're wearing this, you're running for office, would you mind talking to my friend and I? And so I was happy to do so. I had a few more minutes, so sure. So we get to talking a little bit. She starts talking about this fantastic program called Grace that is run out of Constance Church there.
Okay.
So, but it's
Love
really,
Constance.
That is a cool church.
Yep.
I'm telling you, lots of good things coming out of there. But she had this program that they have her running there, but it isn't just for the members of Constance.
Yeah.
Right? It is for, in this case, it provides respite care for people that have special needs kids, and they need a break.
Yeah.
People who don't have a special needs child may not understand the incredible extra stress that is there.
Yeah.
Well, this gal Carrie, she gets it, right?
Right.
And she was talking to me about it. I'm like, this is a cool program. What she didn't know until I said, stop right there. Let me tell you a little bit more about me. I have a member of my family who has Down syndrome. My son, Benjamin, has Down syndrome. We love this. Well, I call him a kid. He's 24.
Yeah, right.
But
he's got kid moments like all of us.
He does. He's fantastic, and I love him to death. But I said, listen, I have this.
You understand.
I have a natural affinity for what you're talking about, and I wish that your program had been there when my son was younger.
Yeah.
But having said that, she had some really good observations
Yep.
about City Park.
Yep.
And one of the things she pointed out was she was walking along and she went there and they had some nice mulch in the playground area. Wheelchairs really don't work well through mulch.
Sure.
And so she's pointing this out. Maybe we could have some tiled areas there, the rubber tiles and stuff. And I said, that's a great idea. I know that it's officially ADA compliant. However, more can be done. But I also told her that I'm a natural ally in this. I think it's a great idea. However, doesn't mean that government has to be the one that picks up the costs on things.
Yep.
It's not the taxpayers that have to do these things. So I basically told her, I'm a fiscal hawk.
Yep.
I've got to look at where we're at right now and focus on the absolute needs versus the wants.
Yep.
And some wants people do believe are needs, and I get that.
I think it's got some level of. I mean, I think there's a real perspective-driven element behind needs and wants. So it boils down to kind of that 5% that you were talking about earlier regarding. Well, you could line up 10 people, and 6 could say that's a want, and 4 could say it's a need, and that conversation has to happen. But if I understand you correctly, and I think I agree with this, mostly, is that another bigger conversation that we're having on a national level all the way to the local level is how much does our government get involved with these things? And so, if this can absolutely be a want for this young lady, it could be a want for you personally.
Absolutely.
Not as a city council, but as Scott Schue. And then, fine, fund it. Fund it. And I think we've forgotten about that quite a bit.
Yes.
At least on the national level, for sure, is like, that's what community is for.
Yes. And we have fantastic people in our community that are on both sides of the spectrum, right?
Right.
But they can agree, they can volunteer, they can help, they can donate, they can do all kinds of things. There's grants.
Yep.
There's
churches. Yep. There's offerings that can be taken up. There's
kinds of things. We don't have to focus on, the taxpayer has to foot the bill for everything.
Agree. Not to mention, you're probably going to be more effective based on my own attempts to fund things. I'm a board member of a nonprofit called Takes a Village. I have obviously multiple businesses. I think about the idea of trying to go through City Hall right now to try to get some of these things done, and you might as well push me off a cliff. I will jump before I even have that conversation. You couldn't pay me to go try to jump through the hoops just to get the city involved to try to fund that versus going, you know what? I know a guy that you should talk to, and he's got a buddy who owns this, and he would be the first person to talk to. And there's no red tape then. Those are just conversations, and it's like, hey, what does this look like to get some funding going? Absolutely. And so it seems like it would be way more efficient. And that's where I would say I'm a little more conservative, a little more small government, a little more on your side of the equation as far as my line between needs and wants would come.
I mean, when talking about that exact example, right? My point beyond just we all have our own ideas on what the needs are and what the wants
Yep.
are. It's not that I'm discarding wants at all. I'm
Yep.
not. I think we need to take all these great ideas. We need to have call it a list
Yep.
of them.
Yep.
They just don't get funded from the taxpayer, at least not right away.
Sure.
Unless there's a way that we've taken care of all of our
Yep.
other obligations, and then we have access. Well,
Yeah.
okay, what's the possibility we're going to have a lot of access? Well, right now,
Not
I'm
a
going to
lot.
say it's pretty low probabilities. You got the county that's proposing 25% increase in their taxes. I'm like, 25%.
That's big.
Now, are they going to get 25%? I'd be shocked
Yeah.
if they can get that. But they proposed it. So that's a start point.
Yeah.
That Andover residents, and I know it's the county, it's beyond Andover residents, but I'm going, no, that is not a good thing for our own individual kitchen budgets again.
Yes.
And so I've got to look at the city budget and say, whew, if they're going to get socked over here, and I'm getting socked right along with you, then we can't afford certain things. So we've got to look really closely at this stuff. I am about, if I could, I'd be no taxes, right?
Sure.
I would be no tax increases. I would be these things. I can't honestly look at people and tell them, the old George Bush, no new tax. No, that not only was that a political mistake for him, it just wasn't reality.
Mm-hmm.
And so in Andover right now, I can't say no taxes. But what I can say is I'm going to scrutinize this so we would minimize anything. I want to be that guy, especially because I lean conservative. I'm going, I don't want taxes. I don't like taxes.
Well,
But
if you
that's
come in at
dishonest to
20,
come in and say, well,
if you come in at 25%, my counteroffer would be no new taxes.
Sure.
That would be my counteroffer.
And then you got to find something, right?
Right.
And we
I
hope
think
that
that's
it's closer to the zero.
Right. Yeah, I mean, that's just, that's one of those tactics that I think also, just broadly speaking, conservatives need to do a better job of as well. And I think the liberal side of the equation does a great job of saying, we want it all.
Yes.
And then it's like, whoa, 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 whoa. How about half? And it's like, no, how about none?
Right.
And then let's be a little more aggressive in our negotiation to not just push up on me so I have to take a step back.
One of the things that I think that I will do once I'm elected is, we mentioned the town halls kind of thing before, but it's also this idea generation kind of thing, meaning, do we have a Facebook page or whatever that's, hey, let's generate ideas on things that could improve Andover.
Yep.
All right. But it's not necessarily, again, the taxpayers that have to do that, but they're great ideas.
Yep.
And so if we can minimize taxes here, we can expand the tax base. By the way, the best way, and I know Andover has a history of we increase tax base by growth, by having people move here. And that's true. That's one way that is accurate. However, businesses, our businesses, we need to have them here. Yes, I recognize that we don't have major highways running through, so we can't have large manufacturing and things like that.
Yeah.
But we sure can have businesses, restaurants come in here. That's actually a good tax base to have businesses. We also don't want to tax the heck out of businesses because we want businesses here. They're choosing to be in Andover. They could choose to be other places.
Yep.
So we need to engage our businesses more. Say, how do we help you to survive and thrive in Andover, which then benefits Andover, the tax base? And I'm like, so have we tried some of these things? I'm not convinced that we've really reached out to businesses. A lot of businesses just want, just get out of my way.
Yep.
Okay, then how do we make sure that happens? What are those issues?
Yeah.
And what I'm intending to do is engage in, call it a listening campaign, whatever you want, but I plan on going to these businesses, sitting down, talking to them, finding out what they're looking for really. As a business guy, I think I already know a lot of this stuff.
Sure.
Well, I know my perspective.
Yeah.
but you might have a different idea than me that's a lot better even. So by golly, I want to hear it.
Ideas are so fun. They should, and yeah. There's so much potential. There's just so much unlimited potential. The thing we have to be willing to do is just be open without assigning self-worth to the idea. So the ideas can just play. They can just play. We're in an amazing community. I think one of the reasons, one of the things that I mentioned to Sarah regarding all these political discussions that I've been having lately is, what I've noticed is there's very limited participation in Andover on the local level. I said, part of that is because it's awesome, because Andover is great. And we don't, we're busy, obviously we lead busy lives. No one wants to go to a city hall meeting, on a whatever night, when their kids are in 19 different sports and 40 different counties, right? But also, we're doing good. We're doing good as a city. We're doing good. We could be doing better, can always be doing better.
Well, and we want to keep that
Yes,
going.
100%.
I'm not here to say the
Yeah,
current city
you're not here to
council is
save
bad,
the
right?
day.
No,
Yeah.
I look at it and I'm going, they've done the best job that they could.
Yeah,
I think some could have done better than others. I got that.
yeah,
But I'm not here to malign them.
Yep.
What I want to do is take and whatever they built already, build upon that, improve those things. I do think that a fiscal hawk is always good to have in a group.
I
right?
think right
You
now
need to
it's
have
pretty appealing. I mean,
Well-
just the general state of the economy and people, and they're feeling it. I think that speaks to a lot of people.
Well, one of the other things, though, that I want to share about that, because I really am that fiscal hawk.
Yeah.
And I'm going to be. But you got to listen to people. You got to have empathy for people, real, authentic.
Yep.
Because when, you've been in their place, perhaps. And I'll use myself as an example. I am considered very successful. In the military, I rose to the rank of lieutenant colonel. My wife rose to the rank of full bird colonel, right? Very successful careers. In business, I've done well. In what I've always done, it's not that I haven't failed.
Of course.
Absolutely.
You can't do well without failure.
You got to go through failure to get success.
For
right?
sure.
And I've learned lessons. Okay. So some people would look at me like I described that church situation. Wow, he's got it all together. No, I've had personal failures, family failures, things that impact me, just like it impacts the people in Andover. They've had things happen to them that a lot of their neighbors might not even know or realize.
Yeah.
And I think being real and open, transparent is a key word here. We need transparency in government, but we need transparency with people. I'm going to share with you something about my family. So 23 months ago, my son died from fentanyl poisoning. And when that happened, it was a situation that crushed us, absolutely crushed us. My wife and I, law and order, we love the police, we're all about this stuff. And we're going, fentanyl. Okay, well, full disclosure, when he was younger, he got addicted to drugs. We put him into this treatment place. We put him into this other one. And things, didn't work until he was ready to go ahead and fight this himself on not on his own, but his own decision to say, I don't want this. So he booked himself into a treatment place, and it was the worst I'd ever seen him. I went and visited him, and he was just horrible looking because he's going through all these withdrawals. Right? The mental issues that go with it, all these other things. But I asked him, I said, well, why don't you just take this other thing that says you can go through this and you won't have the pain and stuff? Then why would I get rid of this drug just to grab another drug? That was his thought. Anyway. And it helps people. That I'm not saying it's not for them. I'm just saying this was his thinking at the time. All right. And then he went through many more days of that. Great. He comes out on the other end. All right. He's drug free, but he's still an addict.
Yeah.
Okay. So that means every day, he's got to get up and choose not to do drugs.
You're preaching to the choir now,
right?
man.
Well, so for 5 years, he's sober. He's, drug free. Now, is he perfectly drug free? I don't know.
Yeah, you never know for sure.
But what I do know is when I found him, he made a mistake. That, even if it's that one-time mistake, because he had something that was laced with fentanyl that killed him.
Jeez.
And there are a lot of other people in Andover, throughout the nation, that have similar things that have happened. These are good people. When I was younger, when I was a kid, that only happened to the people that were the druggies, right? Well, no. Today, it happens to all types of families.
Yeah.
Law and order families.
Yeah.
Families that have it good and families that don't have it so good.
Right.
So I'm a big believer that we need to be looking at our community, and I'm going to get it. Before I go too far on this, I want to go a step further. When my son died that night, it was the 19th of November, and our sheriff's department shows up. We called 911. They were there very quickly, and they showed up. They were so professional. They were so compassionate. They were so good. I mean, I am in debt to those officers that showed up.
That's
They
awesome.
treated my son with respect and dignity in death. But here's why I want to tell you that. Those officers deal with death regularly.
Yeah.
And having seen my son and how he was, that was really tough. But these officers are seeing this kind of thing every day, and then they go home to their families and are trying to lead a normal life.
Right, trying not to become addicts themselves.
That's right, addicts, PTSD kind of things.
Alcohol, food, drug, you name it.
I look at that, I'm like, mental health is a crisis in this country.
Amen, Scott.
It's a crisis here in Andover.
Yes, I could not agree more with that.
Our first responders, when EMS shows up on a scene, the fire department show up on a scene, they often see some bad things. So I am an advocate for mental health, and I get that the county is more responsible. Okay, I'm just saying.
There's a lot we could do there, Scott.
That we could help.
And that's something that speaks to me personally because I am a mental health expert, and I have the clientele progress reports to back it up. So I'm not saying that from a academic standpoint per se, but I am saying that from a end result standpoint. And I hear stories like your son, it breaks my heart. And, all I want to do, I feel that call so deeply to want to be able to be there to show them on a spiritual and psychological level how to frame reality in a way that doesn't lead to the dependency aspect of that. And I don't need you to tell me because I see it all the time in my practice, in the gym, in the world around me, in Andover particularly. This is a big issue. And it may not be something that the government needs to solve, but it could be something that the government at least opens up conversation and maybe some broader conversations to involve our community. Like myself, I'd throw my hat into the ring in a second. Like, what are the conversations we can have? Who are the families we can invite into this beautiful community center that we have to be able to use the free rooms that we're, at liberty to use to invite the public in to say, listen, if you're struggling with health, even on the physical level, it's probably more of a mental, psychological, and spiritual issue anyway. In fact, I state my reputation on it. Let's start talking about the social media and we have the data now. We know. Like, I have a lot of clients that come in that are 5, 6 years older than me, and their children are 5, 6 years older than mine, and they're in disarray. My wife and I had the privilege of being able to have kids at a time where we were able to watch those trends a little longer, so we could make the adjustments, whether that's homeschooling, whether that's technology. One of the greatest accomplishments we ever had was making it to over 16 years of my son's life without him having one of these stupid little things in his pocket.
Absolutely.
Like, we should get a damn trophy for that crap. You know what I mean?
Yes, I do.
And so anyway, I didn't want to get on a soapbox but yeah.
Well, and so I can just kind of
Yep.
complete my full.
Thanks for
thought
sharing
on,
that too, by the way.
Well, here's the good news. If there's something good that happens in death,
Yeah.
is it was just fascinating for me, and looking back, and we do a celebration of life annually on his birthday.
Yeah.
And so we had some friends, his friends, who came over and got to tell us some stories about our son. So we had some really cool things that we otherwise would never have known.
Yeah.
He would never have shared some of these
So
things.
you're still learning about him.
Still learning about him. But what was really, really neat was at the wake, at the funeral, and afterwards, we had so many people that picked up a mic and publicly said, David was my best friend. There were a bunch of them, and I'm like, time out. Everybody can't be your best friend. Yep. You only usually have one.
Sounds like my daughter embellishing to her.
These are all these people getting up, all ages, all genders, all walks of life, and I was like, wait a minute, okay, I know a couple of his friends, and well, talk to the guy. How do you know, Dave? You know what? He sat and he listened to me. Mm-hmm. He just hung out with me. He just met me where I was. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, what? And and he did this with all kinds of people that it just, for me, it floored me. I mean, we all have our vision of our own kids.
Of course.
And some of it's
our blind spots
with, he was naughty. He was, as a kid here doing this. He was more Christ-like than anybody I've ever met. But I didn't even know that.
Yeah.
One guy's telling me about, David gave me literally the shirt off his back because he didn't have a shirt that day. Mm-hmm. He needed one. Well, just take mine. I'll get another one. I'm like, okay, that's really cool.
Yeah.
But to have all these people just feel like somebody cared, somebody was listening. Yeah. David wasn't judging them at all for whatever they were doing. And I'm like, really cool. So, I could stay mired in my grief. I could stay upset about what happened.
Sounds like it's an inspiration now.
It's an inspiration. And
that's
his
awesome.
friends have become our friends.
Yeah.
I mean, when he was around, they were okay, but I wouldn't hang out with these guys. They were his friends, right? Well, now I'm hanging out with them.
That's that's an amazing testimony. Thanks for sharing that. And I think we can even end on that message because we all have a choice, even in our darkest moments, to have that unlock an inspiring pathway forward. Because one of those foundational truths, Scott, is, we're all here for a very short period of time. And so it's not about avoiding death. It's about what is your life worth? It's what are you spending your life doing? How are you loving? And it sounds like your son was a lover to almost a debilitating point. And so, I think that is the message of a local community is we should be loving each other almost to a detriment, and doing that with grace and humility across the aisle, across our differences, across those types of things. And I just want to thank you for throwing your hat in the ring. I want to thank you for sharing your background, your personal struggles. Hopefully this opens up and inspires people even on a small level to be gracious, be grateful. Be grateful for your family. Be grateful for Andover. Be grateful for the amazing human beings that are trying their best to make Andover even better. And it's just awesome. So,
well, thank you
Yep.
for hosting me here today.
Yep.
I'm going to take you up on your offer to host a town hall.
Yeah, let's do
I
it.
think that's important. I think you'll do great at that. You'll help us to facilitate just the communication
Yes.
that is necessary, not at a tight agenda city council meeting that you don't have time to listen and do stuff very much.
Keep
right?
things on point and help articulation.
But to let people have a say and feel like, and it truly be, we care and we are listening.
Yep.
We can't take action on everything, but we certainly can, maybe we'll use what you're thinking.
Yep.
Or maybe we just got to reach back out and say, hey, you talked about this here. How are you doing today? What is going on?
Absolutely.
I think that's important. And then, of course, I'm expecting you to vote for me. And I want all of you to vote for me, too. Yeah.
I'm staying neutral on this thing.
You're a good man. But I'm going to be pushing you. But I get it.
Yep.
This is your show.
Well, it's ours, but yeah, for sure. But Scott Schue, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much, Scott, for coming on. Appreciate your service as well, greatly.
It's my privilege to serve.
So, Seek First Podcast, you guys. God bless. Have a good day.
All right.